Okie doke. Alright. Let's see where we are. You are live, so it says. I have no confirmation though. Let's see what happens. Where are we? Am I? Nice. Okay, we are totally live. Okay.
白岩学園3年 B 組の皆さん、こんにちは。
Alright. Hey guys, how's it going? So, it's Friday. And, let's go to the main. There we are. I had a great day today. I'm pretty excited. I got some audio that's pretty outstanding, and excuse me, I'm gonna be editing it. Normally I don't just stitch together audio alone, but that's just what I've got, and I hope it's gonna be, well, it'll be amusing for me. We'll see how it goes. My forte is video, not audio. So, and also I'm much better at making little short stories out of images or whatever. And in this case, I'm going to be stitching together basically a monologue. So it's rough. It's way outside of my normal thought process and my normal work style. But still, I'm happy. I like it. It's actually related to the homeless thing that's going on here in Los Angeles. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see. We'll see how the audio shapes up. Hopefully, it'll be as good as I think it'll be. We'll see what goes down. So anyway, I hope everyone's having a good time, having a good evening. Sorry that Holly had to pop in and out. Alas, sleep is actually a really, really good thing to get, and Holly decided that she was going to be responsible, and here I am, like an idiot, just streaming at freaking 11 p.m., basically ruining my sleep cycle, but what are you going to do? It's the only time that I can stream without, because I live in an apartment complex and I've got neighbors that just do things. They have like animals and kids and so on. It's a big giant thing. So anyway, hopefully in the future I'll be able to stream whenever I want, and it won't be dependent on me streaming when everyone is simply asleep. At any rate, so today, what is it? Ritual, purity, and impurity. This is the next part in my Talmud series, and the idea is I've got a copy of a book here called The Essential Talmud, and we're going to read it. By we, I mean me, and by it, obviously, I mean The Essential Talmud. This is by Aidan Steinsaltz, and my understanding is he translated the Talmud into English or something like that. And that was what I was reading like a couple days back, but it was kind of woolly-headed and not the greatest thing to read. It wasn't very interesting. On the other hand, this book, The Essential Talmud, I've been getting a lot out of it. So, let's see, yesterday was... What was yesterday? I believe it was on sacrifices. That's right. And the big takeaway from yesterday was essentially sacrifices are super hardcore. And in the Talmud, they devote a lot of time and energy to sacrifices. Jigaboo Killa, I'm not going to be doing sacrifices just yet. I'm going to be looking into that. I got this from the library. So what I'm reading is a physical book from the library. And I'm going to be going back to the library, indeed, to try to find some books that are on sacrifices. So, that's the next goal. And I'm also going to, there are a few avenues of investigation that I am really keen on getting into. And sacrifice actually is one of the biggies for me for personal reasons. Today, on the other hand, we're going to go with ritual purity and impurity. I'm not altogether sure what it is, so this is basically just a dipping of toes. This entire series is 100% just about getting a gauge and understanding of the Talmud in general. Cultural exchange. So since we are all nominal Christians or atheists, or all five of us, the idea is to get an understanding for other people's religion and beliefs. So in this case, Talmud, and we're going to learn. So here we go. We are now going to learn about... Oh, gosh darn it. I got the wrong page number because I'm retarded. 2:30. There we go. So yeah, we're gonna learn about the Talmud. Cultural exchange, you guys. Cultural exchange. Diversity is our strength. So here we go. We're gonna get mega diverse and learn about the Talmud. Here we go. Ritual purity and impurity. Okay. Let's see here. Oh yeah. Oh hey buddy, how's it going? Yeah, Okay, so before I actually start with the ritual purity and impurity thing, let me just say I'm actually a little bit bummed because the Google Hangouts, my understanding is that the word on the street is that those are going to go away starting in August of this year. So that's very, very soon. That's in like 2 weeks or something. So in 2 weeks, OV's streams, if I'm understanding this correctly, in 2 weeks OV's streams are going to be the way of the past, and not the future. And it's a super duper bummer because, like, I like the Hangouts. Like, you can just talk to people and you can do whatever, and it's like, well, shit. Half of my favorite streams are legitimately people that are talking with multiples, because obviously, if you can do a Skype call where it's just one-on-one, and that's fine, that's not a big deal. But there have been multiple streams that have really been huge in terms of instruction for me, that have featured multiple people on the stream, and I like that. I think that's fantastic. I think it's great. So the idea of Google Hangouts taking off, that's just sort of a minor bummer. Kevin Burger King, excuse me, says an alternative will pop up if one doesn't exist already. Yeah, I believe that. I think that we can get away with just sort of using Skype as an interim temporarily. Those of us who haven't thought about it, me, we should be fine. It's just, you get used to something and then you just have it on your mind. At any rate, this is all about, getting strong and learning about the Talmud. So let's get back, now that I've been yammering on for 11 minutes. Let's get back on to topic, ritual purity and impurity. Here we go, by Aiden Steinsaltz. Okay. The laws of ritual purity and impurity take up a whole order of the Mishnah, and, even more than sacrificial law, constitute a self-sufficient unit that is perhaps the most recondite section of the Talmud. Although these halakot were discussed in various parts of Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds, it is almost certain that no entire commentary was written on them apart from the Nida tractate, for which there was great practical need. One of the reasons for this apparent neglect is that these laws are almost completely confined to Palestine and to the periods in which the temple existed. In the absence of a temple and of sacrifices, there was little justification for observing the rules of ritual purity, and when sacrifices were no longer offered, it was impossible to observe the full scope of these halakot. The laws of purity are essentially a complex, unified, my bad. The laws of purity are essentially a complex, unified network of laws interrelated within a special logical structure. Although the Torah devoted considerable space to them, it offered no explanations. In Mishnaic times, it was related that Rabban Yohanan ben Zakkai once succeeded, through his wise responses, in persuading a non-Jew of the value of these laws, but his disciples then said to him, "You have fobbed him off with a vague answer, but what have you to say to us?" Okay. That's funny. That's just it's amusing. In times it was related that this guy once succeeded. So like one time, a rabbi once succeeded in convincing someone of Jewish law once. And then the Jews were like all pissed off because like, okay, fine. So the goy got all the attention. What about us, buddy? That's funny. Okay, anyway, continuing. To this, Rabban Yohanan replied that these matters did not derive from rational consideration, and that they pertained to one of these spheres, of which the Holy One, blessed be He, said, quote, I have passed laws, decreed decrees, and you are not permitted to reflect on them, end quote. In fact, this legislation is extremely involved and contains a plethora of detail that seems to have been determined at random with no clear rationale. Okay, that sounds really convoluted and unpleasant. Okay. At the same time, the general structure of these halakot, gosh, that sucks. Ooh. Reading words with which I'm not familiar sucks. Anyway. I'll restart the sentence. At the same time, the general structure of these halakot may be comprehended with the aid of several basic principles. First, it should be recalled that purity and impurity are not concepts related to the sphere of cleanliness or hygiene. Observance of the laws of purity may in some ways serve as an aid to hygiene, but this is neither the reason nor the explanation for their issue. As regards the basic outlook, there appear to be two main spheres: life, the most complete expression of which is anything pertaining to sanctity, parenthetical, regarded as the primary source of life, and parenthetical, and death, and the void, seen as the opposite of life and of sanctity. Generally speaking, that's funny. It says first. I'm wondering if there's a second, but I'm not seeing a second. What a bummer. Okay, all right. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to worry about that. Generally speaking, it may be said that the living, it may be said that which is living and healthy contains no impurity, and that impurity increases as an object comes closer to death. Thus, the most impure thing, quote, the supreme cause of impurity, end quote, parenthetical, avi avat ha tuma, end parenthetical, according to Talmudic terminology, is a corpse, and the lower degree of pollution is that of the leper, the zav, parenthetical, victim of gonorrhea, end parenthetical, and carcasses of animals and reptiles. The impure object is usually not only impure in itself, but also transmits its pollution to objects that come into contact with it. The higher the degree of pollution, the greater the ability to pollute other objects in different ways. I can't help but think this actually reminds me a little bit of like those 1980s movies. Think about Raiders of the Lost Ark as directed by Steven Spielberg. You'll note that there's actually a lot of, quote, impure symbolism and imagery within that movie, and it does seem to permeate in some way. That's kind of interesting if you stop and think about it. I'm sure there must be examples like literary and also because I spend a lot of my time on movies. I'm trying to think of a movie that was written by a fellow white that involves something that is impure that transmits to other things. I can only imagine that zombies are the most obvious example. But I'm trying to think of another one, because I'm sure that there must be a crapload of examples of this. So whatever. Anyway, it's interesting that the impure object, those tend to be corpses and death or whatever, and that the more impure, the more that it wants to transmit itself its impurity. That's interesting. All right, the corpse, for example, pollutes whatever comes into contact with it, which is then sometimes polluted to so great an extent that it, in its turn, becomes an independent source of pollution. Pollution is usually conveyed by touching the impure object, but sometimes even by remaining under the same roof or by carrying the polluted object without touching it. Not every object can be polluted. The more sensitive the person or object touching the source of pollution, the more easily it is infected. It's funny that they're talking about like biological things or something, infection, pollution, impure. That's for some reason it just reminds me of like biological stuff. Anyway, certain foods and drinks take on pollution with great ease. Wooden objects and fabrics are affected to a lesser degree. Metal objects are regarded as more sensitive to certain types of pollution, and human beings are defiled only by a specific degree of pollution. Living animals, growing plants, and unfinished objects cannot be infected with pollution. According to the Halakha, changed slightly by later enactments, the laws of impurity are only significant for Jews. Non-Jews are not sensitive to pollution and cannot transmit it to others. Holy cow. Holy cow. We don't even matter. We don't matter. You don't matter. That's funny. That's funny. All right, let's continue. Purification from pollution does not always take the same form. Gosh, I'm sorry. Something about that is just really, that's a hell of a thing. That is one hell of a thing. I just want to, okay, so, yeah, I'm going to have to get into, the purity thing, are not sensitive and cannot transmit it to others. So we can't transmit it, but objects apparently can. So the best we can do is carry a polluted object. That's the best thing that we can do, which I suppose kind of... Okay, so if you can imagine for just a moment, okay, so Eke Lux, if I were to be around a fellow white, I could not personally infect the fellow white. However, if I had an object that was polluted and gave that object to the fellow white, or if I indicated that the fellow white had been around the object for an extended period of time, then they would understand that they could have been infected by the object or whatever it is. So I suppose there is, if you think about it from a certain standpoint, it's a little bit similar to those guys, these freaking weirdos. They decided that they were going to dip their hollow tip bullets in, or hollow point bullets in bacon fat or pig fat or something, so that if they ever happen across a jihadi for some reason, they could shoot the guy with pig fat, which would, within the religious belief system of the Muslims, would create a situation in which it was either difficult or impossible for the Muslim to reach Jannah. That's their version of heaven. So yeah, this just kind of gives me the idea that maybe there are things that I regard as quite wonderful and beneficial that maybe other groups might think of as being impure, and it might be good for me to have such a totem around me. It's just a passing thought, obviously I mean nothing by it. I wouldn't want to offend any Buddhists. Okay, continuing. Purification from pollution does not always take the same form and depends both on the nature of the polluting agent and of the object it pollutes. Pottery, for example, cannot be cleansed and must be broken, while most other utensils can be purified. Actually, let's see here. It's a little early right now, but I just realized that for psychological reasons, I am in I'm in a circumstance that I don't particularly like at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a track. I'm going to play some music, and I'm going to handle a particular thing, and I will return shortly. Let me get over to work. There we are. Let's see here. We've got this. Properties. Check. All right. So yeah, I'm going to go and do a thing, and no. Okay, I'm going to go do a thing, and I will be back momentarily. AFK BRB. All right. So that was good old Eamon Tobin. Hey Blondie off of his 2002 album, Back From Out Where. My God, I bought that when it came out. Great album too, by the way. Fantastic album. That track is, I forget what track it is. It's like 6, maybe 7 or something like that. And it's a part of like 3 good tracks in a row. I really like it when an album functions as a complete playthrough, something you can listen all the way through. And Hey Blondie, yeah, that's a part of a series of tracks that work really well together. I only isolated it because I happen to like it. Excuse me, sorry, I just had some cashews. At any rate, let's go back to Ritual, Purity, and Impurity. I think we're on page 2. Oh, there we are. I used a bookmark. Nice. Okay, where are we? Are no longer observed and practiced in mikvah. I think I might have to reread one of the paragraphs. Well, that's a real bummer. Dang it. All right. Yeah, I guess I'll just start at the place where I had my own cute little shocker. Non-Jews are not sensitive to pollution and cannot transmit it to others. Again, basically, you don't matter. It's a hell of a sentiment. All right, continuing. Purification from pollution does not always take the same form and depends on the nature of the polluting agent and of the object it pollutes. Pottery, for example, cannot be cleansed and must be broken, while most other utensils can be purified in the same way as human beings. All types of purification have one factor in common: immersion in water. So this is where baptism comes from. I'll be darned. I'm so glad that I'm reading this book. I feel like I'm getting a really great primer so that later on, because I do want to go into sacrifice, and I do want to go into ethics, and also, well, yeah, there are a lot of topics to cover. I mean, if you're going to learn about a topic, if you're going to learn about Talmudic thinking, you got to do a deep dive, and this is a fantastic dipping of toes. I'm sorry to bang on about that, but holy cow, yeah, purification. They all have one factor in common: immersion in water. Man, just think about the symbolism that you can employ. Like, if anyone here happens to be writing something, there's a lot of symbolism that can be employed based on what I'm saying right now. Okay, continuing. Immersion is carried out as specified in the Torah in a spring or other source of water. Mikvah Mayim. Yeah, actually, now that I think about it, I don't remember who it was. It might have been Jacob. He was wandering around with all of his, wealth and slaves and shit, and he was digging wells. And the wells kept being taken over by other tribes or something, or the townsfolk. Yeah, because Jacob was a stranger in a particular town, so he wanted to settle in the town. The townsfolk didn't care for him too much, so anytime he would dig a well, they would claim it for themselves, and they would say, "Fuck off, this is ours." And he would have to dig another well. And I can't help but think that there is something to that on an esoteric level, because here, purification through water, if he was digging wells, I mean, by definition, there's a purification element in there somewhere. It's just kind of funny, that's all. It's just funny. All right, continuing. Later, this term was shortened to mikvah, which came to mean a place where enough water has gathered to serve for purification purposes, like a well. The polluted individual enters and immerses himself in the mikveh, thus cleansing himself to a certain degree of his impurity. Immersion in the mikveh is not necessarily a matter of cleanliness, since the source of purification is merely a natural gathering place of water. It was necessary in ancient times to utilize the standing water in caves, which was not always salubrious. From the Mishnaic era onward, special structures were built for this purpose, and more convenient facilities were introduced for the bathers. Even when most of the purification laws were no longer observed in practice, the mikveh retained its importance. It served women as a place for purification from the ritual uncleanliness of menstruation or childbirth, and men utilized it for purification before study or prayer. The obligation for men to immerse themselves was no longer binding in the Talmudic era, although the decree of immersion was attributed to Ezra. The practice was actually abolished. In later times, and mainly as a result of the intensification of the Kabbalistic strain in Judaism, immersion took on renewed significance as a means of spiritual purification, and it is still practiced to a large extent among Hasidism. In addition to immersion in water, which is a component of all excuse me, sorry about that. In addition to immersion in water, which is a component of all purification rituals, there are special ceremonies for specific kinds of pollution. The Zav, the leper, and the woman after childbirth cannot be completely cleansed except by offering a special sacrifice, not for atonement but for purification. Defilement by the dead, parenthetical, the gravest and also one of the commonest forms of defilement, could only be overcome by sprinkling water mixed with the ashes of a red heifer. Red heifer. This purification ceremony is specified in considerable detail in the Torah, but since it was a very important one, and it was not easy to find a red heifer, according to the Mishnah, the ceremony of burning the carcass of the heifer was carried out only 8 times in the course of Jewish history. This ceremony was hedged by a number of restrictions and qualifications over the centuries in order to emphasize its vital significance. In the days of the temple, the carcass of the heifer was burned on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, and this is one of the reasons why this spot is considered sacred. A special bridge was constructed between the Temple Mount and the Temple of Olives, lest there be any suspicion of pollution en route. The ashes of the red heifer, parenthetical, or the ashes of all the heifers, since according to tradition, some of the most ancient ashes still remained at the end of the Second Temple era, were carefully preserved and used for the purification of those defiled by contact with the dead. For several generations after the destruction of the temple, some scholars believe that it was as long ago as 300 years, such ashes existed and were used for the ceremony. When the ashes were used up, it was no longer possible to purify the polluted, and thus there was no logical reason for observing the purification laws. The assumption from the Middle Ages onward was that we are all polluted by the dead, either directly or indirectly, so that it was no longer feasible to observe the laws. We're all polluted. Well, okay, no, actually, since we are not Jewish, we cannot be polluted, so it doesn't matter for us. These guys. All right, continuing. In general, the laws of ritual purification apply only in direct relation to sacrifices and to sacred objects. Religious law does not obligate a man to be pure, except, or rather, with the exception of the Kohanim, priestly tribe, the Kohanim, all right, who were forbidden to come into contact with corpses. The prohibition still exists, and the descendants of the priestly clans are still forbidden to handle a corpse unless, as the Torah specifies, it is that of a close member of the family or of a met mitzvah, parenthetical, a man found dead by the wayside who has no one to bury him, end parenthetical. No defiled person was allowed to enter the area of the temple or excuse me, it's these cashews, or to participate in worship, and this rule is violated on pain of grave punishment. The priest was forbidden to consume any of the priestly gifts while in a state of pollution. It is therefore clear why in temple times any man bringing a sacrifice or entering the temple on a pilgrimage was obliged to purify himself. Priests and members of their families were also obliged to cleanse themselves in order to be permitted to eat the offerings. The hour at which the priests ate their contributions after immersing themselves and being purified was so regular that it served as a recognized designation of time. Despite the fact that most members of the congregation were not obliged to maintain themselves in a state of purity, there were those who nevertheless observed the rules of ritual purification out of a desire to live fuller lives, because purification was perceived as the perfect state. They included a few individuals who observed the laws so strictly that they ate only foods that were in a state of purity required for the priests, but there were many more, quote, who ate hulin, common foods, according to the rules of purity, end quote. They were apparently quite numerous and created their own religio-social movement known as Havarim, parenthetical comrades, end parenthetical. It was composed of those people who ate only pure foods and strictly observed the tithe rules. The groups of the Havarim, who evolved special initiation ceremonies, were diverse in composition, who evolved special initiation ceremonies were diverse in composition and that's strange, same am I? Yeah, I missed that. Let me, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted from the day. That's my bad. Let me go ahead and do that over, because that's really embarrassing. The groups of Havarim who evolved special initiation ceremonies were diverse in composition, and most of the disciples of the sages were apparently members at some time, although only the academy heads were eligible for membership without benefit of special ceremonies. Women were also accepted for membership, and it was decreed that, quote, the wife of a Haver is herself a Haver, end quote. The various Essene sects were apparently closely linked to the Havarim, but tended to asceticism, while most of the Havarim did not. The Essenes, by the way, the Essenes were called zealots, and those guys were a tribe of male-only Jews, and males only, and they lived like in the hills or something like that, and they were these weird like quasi-monk warriors or something, and again, males only, so they did not obviously reproduce, and the only way that the Essenes were able to continue to exist, because they're in a constant state of decline because it's impossible for them to reproduce, is new Essenes would have to be inducted in one way or another. And I suspect that they probably ended up kidnapping children. As weird as that sounds, I suspect that must have been the case. Because I mean, they would have to get converts. You have to replenish one way or another. Ooh. Excuse me. And it is claimed that the Essenes were actually the people that the Naga. What were they called? There were those the scrolls. Those scrolls that were found like in the 1940s or something like that. The Dead Sea Scrolls, I think. Yeah. Found in like clay pots or some bullcrap in like some cave in some weird section that like nobody cared about, and then some weirdo just wandered in. It was like, what's in these things? And then found like a copy of like new books of the Bible or some such. Anyway, apparently the Essenes were the ones that were responsible for that. Yeah. Yeah, Goose Bear, I wanted to get a copy of the Dead Sea Scrolls like a long time ago and read them, and I couldn't find a copy of them for reasons. I was like in my early 20s. I only barely cared. So now I care. Now it's interesting to me. But way back in my early 20s, it was not dissimilar to purchasing a book by Nietzsche or something, or Kierkegaard or whatever. At any rate, yeah, at some point I'll go and look into them. But it's just funny that they mentioned the Essenes with regards to these purity laws. Ooh. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm gonna have to make this one a short stream tonight. Hey, Tom Anderson, how's it going, buddy? Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't say that I'm exactly Tradcath, though I'm highly sympathetic these days. At any rate, here we go. Let's continue. After the disappearance of the ashes of the red heifer, the purification injunctions could no longer be observed in full, and they were abolished for all practical purposes. At the same time, two types remained applicable, those relating to the pollution of women by nida, menstruation and childbirth, and the laws of priestly pollution and purification. The impurity of nida has implications for the marital relationship. For sexual relations are prohibited as long as the woman remains impure. Most of the mikvat from the Mishnaic period onward, and possibly... Okay, actually... Alright, sorry, I had like three thoughts go through my head at the same time. Most of the mikvat from the Mishnaic period onward, and possibly also at the end of the Mishnaic era itself, were dedicated to this type of purification. It is not surprising, therefore, that Nida is the sole tractate in the order of Taharat, to which both the Babylonian and Jerusalem Talmuds devote commentaries. The prohibition of priestly pollution through the contact of the dead also survived. Here, too, there was a special reason why this particular interdict remained. In modern times, the Kohanim, like all of Israel, are defiled by contact with the dead, direct or transmitted through others. The Torah ban, however, is direct, not at the condition of the priest, but at his actions, and thus the law continued to be observed even after the laws of purification had, in practice, been invalidated. And that's the end of our book, or rather, chapter. So let's see here. We've got a clean 9 minutes or so. So I'm very interested at the moment in this. Oh, hey, Delquois here. Hey, buddy, how's it going, pal? This purity thing is also very interesting. I think what I'm going to do is the library is open tomorrow. So what I might do is go to the library and see if I can find... There's got to be some in circulation. I know that there are I can go to the library and I can find, it's fine, of course, obviously this would be the case, but I can go to the library and I can pick up copies of the Talmud that are not for general circulation. The only way that I could possibly read those on stream is if I were to take photocopies, and I'm sure they must have very special machines for those photocopies, ones that don't damage the paper or ink or whatever. So I'm going to have to, in my investigations of sacrificial laws and purity laws, I'm going to have to be very, very careful about how I go about this. I'm going to have to find books that are in circulation so that I can get them, and if I somehow stumble upon something that sounds like a description of something that's in a book that would have to go and view downtown, I may have to go downtown, and I may actually have to go to the main library so that I can read some of the more arcane passages within the Talmud. What a thing. What a gall darn thing. This is very, very, this is a big deal. So yeah, that whole thing about purity, Delacroix and also Tom Anderson, I'm not sure if you guys were here, but I found out that purity laws are a big, big deal, and purification always involves water. Anytime in a movie you see a main character involving him or herself in bathing or in water, that's probably a reference to purification. And I think that this is why if you watch, or rather, if anyone here is familiar with the Joseph Campbell thing, Joseph Campbell's mythic program or whatever, the hero's journey, in the middle section of that, there is typically an area where the hero almost drowns, or the hero is underwater for one reason or another. Purification. That's what that is. It's purification. I had been wondering for a while about what that means. Going into the belly of the beast or some bullcrap like that. But the thing is, that's usually later on. That's usually in, like, quote, third act or whatever. But knowing now that water is always in reference to, knowing now that any time you're dealing in purification from a Talmudic standpoint, you need to use the water. Every time you see a hero in water in the middle section of a movie, boom, being purified in one way or another. That's very interesting. And also, my understanding from what I've been reading anyway, is that corpses, reptiles, and dead animals are corrupting agents. And if a Jewish person is exposed to a corpse or a dead animal or a reptile or whatever, it can possibly infect the Jewish person with the pollution. Interestingly, objects can be polluted, but animals and plants cannot. An unfinished man-made object cannot be polluted. Only a finished object may be polluted. Clay and pottery can be polluted. Fabrics, food can be polluted, obviously. Fabrics can also be polluted. It's less easy for them than like food or whatever. And metal objects are very hard to pollute. And very interesting is that non-Jews cannot be polluted and cannot transmit pollution. So apparently we're out of the mix. They are the chosen people. They're the only ones that are capable of being polluted. We are not chosen, therefore we cannot be polluted. And finally, there was one more that was interesting. Oh yeah, that's right. Apparently, the purity laws with regards to purification after touching a corpse, those are no longer valid because you had to do that using the ashes of a red heifer, and those ashes were used up hundreds of years ago, so they don't do that anymore. But they still purify women who have menstruated. So, because you can't have sex with an impure woman or something to that effect. So there are lots of interesting things going on with all of these purity laws. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Let's see here. Do Lutherans or Anglicans do baptism? I think they do. I think, but I'm not 100%. It's fundamentally just a ritual, and to be perfectly honest, I kind of like rituals, so long as you understand that the ritual itself is just a ritual. The mental object that you're thinking about, the point, the objective of the ritual is what's truly important. What is it? You can think about going into a store and buying something as being fundamentally ritualistic. You go in desiring an object, you find your object. Before you leave, you go to the altar. You tithe in front of the priest. The priest blesses you with a receipt, and then you get your object and you get the hell out of there. It's basically a ritual. Buying, whatever it is. I don't know. Earlier today I bought some hummus and a cucumber because I love hummus and cucumber. That was a ritual. That was basically just a ritual. And I think rituals are fine. I don't really have any problem with them. It's so long as you just remember that it's just a ritual, and that's really all that it is. I think that sometimes these guys, they get a little bit hung up on it, and it's possible the question of do Anglicans or evangelicals engage in baptism? I don't think it would be as important. I don't think. Remembering that all they fundamentally need is belief in Jesus. That's it. The baptism is sort of ancillary. I mean, it's nice. It's great. For psychological reasons, I kind of like it. It makes me want to get a second baptism or something. But it's not the be all end all. It's more for psychological reasons. So nice. Tom Anderson says evangelicals are heretics. With regards to the mega churches that are around right now, I kind of agree. Right. I think I'm gonna go ahead and call stream because I'm just hecka tired. So I think I'm gonna call stream. I might play one more track. Let's see here. Properties. Who are and what are you? You know what? I'm gonna play one more track. I'm going to play one last track. This is a fun track. I like this track. I want to end on a good note. So for me, this is going to be the track before I call stream. So here we go, guys. Here's a little purification ritual. right. Freaking love that track, man. Freaking love that track. At any rate, speaking of rituals, I am going to call stream because I'm flipping tired. I want to go to bed, and that's the long and the short of it right there. Let's see here. Tom Anderson says, I hope you're right. I just got back from the country club where I had a cigar and some whiskey and networked with some boomers. They're pretty hopeless. Yeah, I know. It bums me out too. There are like 5 based boomers that I've ever really met, and it's great, but they grew up in the time of flower children, and there's not much that you can do about that. I'm about to upload some audio that I captured where I was talking with a homeless guy, and he was Gen X, like the earlier part of Gen X, as where I'm the later part of Gen X, so he's like on the cusp of being a boomer in the same way that I'm on the cusp of being a millennial. And yeah, same thing. He was, despite being hounded for being a white guy, he still maintains his "I'm not racist" stance, and God bless him. Like like in my heart of hearts, I'm kind of with him still. I understand that some people. I mean, I am paused, and some people will call me pause in the derisive sense, which is fine. But the thing is that, like, on a basic level, I still just want to like hang out and have an okay time. I don't fucking care. People can do and think whatever they want. It's just that I happen to live now in a context in which it's not so easy to just be blasé about your attitudes regarding much of anything anymore. So it's a real pain in the ass. At any rate, as where I'm willing now to be much more conscious of like race and so on and so forth. My gosh, boomers, like they're still in the middle of it. Ah, gosh, it's such a bummer. They're being hounded, they're being beaten, attacked, names are being called. These people are getting they're getting hounded. There's no other way. They're just getting hounded. I don't know how else to explain it. And they refuse to notice what's going on around them. They refuse to acknowledge that they're being attacked by people that they were defending 3 days previous, and that they've basically been betrayed. And it's so depressing sometimes. Anyway, let's see here. Kevin asks, why don't I leave CA? I'm going to as quickly as possible. For me, the last straw was the ammunition registry, which is a backdoor gun registry, because now they know everything that they can infer the types of firearms that you own. So, for example, if someone purchases a lot of 5.56, the person likely owns either a Mini 14 or an AR. If the person purchases a lot of 7.62 by 39, they probably own either an SKS or an AK. If they purchase a lot of 9mm, well, it could be just about anything, really. But the likelihood, it's probably either a Glock or a Beretta 92, something like that. Or a CZ, because of the handgun roster that limits the types of handguns that you can purchase. So it's easier to infer the types of things that you own. If the person owns, but you get the idea. Anyway, the point is that they'll know how much you purchase. They know what you purchase. So, because every bullet is logged. So, they know if you are just a general stock, the people who hoard ammunition or something, the preppers or whatever. they'll know if you're that type. They'll also know if you're one of those guys that plinks every weekend, because a guy that buys a little bit of 5.56 every couple of months, yeah, he might be stocking up, but he also might be plinking. It's tough to say. But a guy that buys 5.56 every month in bulk, that dude's plinking. Like that guy, they know that guy's a real thing, right? And I'm convinced, this is speculation on my part, but it's not hard to use your imagination. I am convinced that what they're going to do is they're going to cross-reference. So they're going to, and it's going to be three main vector points: political beliefs, red flag laws, and also the ammunition registry. The political beliefs are going to be DSM'd, I think, at some point, which will trigger the red flag laws. And once you get red flagged, they can take away your firearms. So I think what they're going to do is they're going to focus on accusing people who purchase large amounts of firearms as being paranoid or something. Not that they're going to use the large ammo purchases themselves as the justification. It's just that they will say, "Oh, that guy owns weapons and he's also proficient. We need to accuse him of something. Let's comb through everything he's ever done in his life and see if he has ever done anything that we can accuse him, like in the negative sense of having done or believing or whatever, so that we can red flag him and then take away his firearms." Again, I know that sounds paranoid on my part. I am fully aware of that, but I do think that's... just look at what they're doing. Everything is organized in such a way that that would be very, very easy to trigger. So, at any rate, let's see here. Rich D. Oh, hey, buddy, how's it going? You've got an interesting gun video to see. Oh yeah, well, freaking poster, buddy. Here, I'm gonna mod Rich D. Post your video, man. And let's see here. So anyway, yeah, at some point I'm gonna leave CA. The only reason I haven't left California yet, the only couple of reasons I haven't left California, is because I don't have the money. It's shockingly expensive to leave California, and I don't know where I'm gonna go. So I kind of want to go to Idaho because it's still it's in the western section of the country, which means that it's probably closer to my own culture and mindset, the vibe, the ethos, whatever it is, the spirit, the zeitgeist of Idaho is probably similar enough to California that I would likely fit in, I think. As where if I went to the East Coast, I think it would be a little weirder, I think. That said, I was looking at Missouri and Kentucky, both of which look pretty good to me. I really like Missouri and Kentucky. Missouri for obvious reasons. But yeah, I still like Idaho. The weather is similar to what I'm used to, and the culture is similar to what I'm used to. So, I kind of like it. Plus, the Rocky Mountains, man. The Rockies are beautiful. Huge fan of the mountains. If I can't be around the beach, because, I grew up on the beach. I'm a Los Angelino, born, bred, and raised. If I can't be around the beach, I kind of want to be around something that is big, imposing, and impressive. So the mountains are pretty obvious as far as I'm concerned. So, Idaho seems not too bad. They've got pretty good gun laws out there. Yeah, Kevin is East Coast is the best. No way, bro. West Coast, son. Anyway, but yeah, I kind of like the mountains, and it's a little far out there. Whatever, it doesn't matter. That's a different discussion. But there's one thing that I do like about Idaho, which is that CCI is based in Idaho. So if there were to be any sort of a weird thing that happened, I have no idea what I'm even talking about, but if a weird thing did happen, if nothing else, there would be 22 ammunition for quite some time, so that's not so bad. At any rate. Okay, I am tired. I'm freaking wiped out, so I think, let's see here, open link in new tab. I'm just getting the gun video. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, the Daily Shooter. Hell yeah. Yeah. The Daily Shooter, he's a guy that moved out of California and he moved to Nevada, for those who don't know. And he was like really embarrassed about it or something like that. He's like, oh, I totally, I tucked tail and I left or something like that. And but now that he's in Nevada, which sadly is going to turn blue, so it's whatever. But for a little while, he's able to purchase like actual firearms. So look at what he's got. It's some kind of G2S. That's a firearm with which I'm not familiar. I'm very familiar with anything that is on the California roster. I'm not familiar with anything that is off roster, with the exception of like the Glock 43, and like the Ruger SR22, and like a couple of others. Oh yeah, the M&P Compact 22, but like just only a couple of pistols. Like that's about it, because anyway, but yeah, this looking at the still here, I have no idea what that is. That's completely new to me. It looks like a subcompact, possibly a single stack with a rail. That's very unusual. Looks like a 380 or something, but I can't tell. Anyway, it looks neat. It looks cool. I like it. Anyway, okay, whatever. Anyway, okay. So yeah, I'm going to. So I've got Rich D's. Thanks. Okay, we're gonna subscribe. Oh wait, no, is that the same video? Yeah, it's the same video. And there was another. Oh yeah, somebody posted a Discord, and Tom Anderson was saying that there's a place that he wants to go after the fact. Let's see, that's going to be Norvin Hobbs is streaming. Nice, yeah. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and post Norvin's the stream that's going on right now one more time just for the sake of it. So anyone that wants to hop on over, get over to Norvin's, you guys. And I guess that's it. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and call stream now because I'm just tired. So anyway, thank you everyone for popping in. It's super awesome to see everyone. I'm gonna go and sleep because sleep. And there we are. And now the final element of my nightly closing ritual. A little bit of K streaming. Daily Shooter. Big shout out to the Daily. Everyone should check out the Daily Shooter. That guy's awesome. If you're going to keep and bear arms, if you're going to exercise your God-given right to keep and bear arms as enshrined by within the Second Amendment, I think that safety and handling is huge. You should always know how to handle your weapon properly. Rule number 1, always treat every firearm like it is loaded. Rule number 2, never cover or sweep anything that you are not willing to destroy. Rule number 3, your finger stays off of the trigger until your sights are on target. And the fourth and final rule is be aware of your target and what's beyond it. Safety first. And there we go. Okay, guys, I'm going to continue tomorrow with more Talmud talks. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to learn a lot of new things, and it's going to be wonderful. So there we go. Remember to brush and floss, and I'll see everyone in the chats. Cheers.